Welcome back to the Convo Couch, my humans. I am Pasta Jardula, and Johnny Sue is still spinning on the ones and twos. And ladies and gentlemen, you know what a political junkie I am, and especially when it comes to election integrity. So we went out there and got you a great guest. Today's guest is a computer scientist specializing in computer security and computer forensics. She's also considered to be one of the leading experts on electronic voting systems in the world. She went to the University of Pennsylvania, where she got her master's, but she also teaches a seminar once a year at the University of Maryland where she compares financial securities to voting securities. Welcome, Rebecca, Dr. Rebecca Mercuri. How you doing, Dr. Rebecca Mercuri?
Very good. And I got my PhD at University of Pennsylvania as well, School of Engineering and Applied Science.
An engineer. We love engineers. Johnny Sue is an engineer himself. We know all about this situation when it comes to election integrity. We've been following it on the ground. We've been going to meetings. We've been reading. We've been talking to experts like yourself. First off, just tell us how you got involved with election integrity.
Oh, it's interesting. I was actually a committee woman in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And one evening at a committee meeting, somebody came down from the county and said, oh, we're going to get new voting machines. We're going to get rid of our lever machines. This was like in 1988, I think it was. And I was like, oh, they're going to get rid of the lever machines. So didn't know what they were going to get, but I, heard a little bit about what they were talking, sort of confused. I came home and just as it happened, there was this new issue of the New Yorker magazine where there was a lengthy article. That was back when New Yorker would print a 60-page article on voting, which was written by Ronnie Duggar. Very long time. He actually, I believe, owned and also was the editor of, president and editor of the Texas Observer. And many great writers, many great reporters came out of the Texas Observer. And he was really your old school type of a real journalist, where your article is really a journal. And this article went into great detail about all these horrible voting machines and what was going on. And so I actually went to a copy center and I photocopied all 60 pages of this. I think I might have even made 3 copies because there were 3 county commissioners. And I sent them each one along with a cover letter of why these proposed voting machines that they were thinking of getting were really bad. So they invited me to come to there. Again, I was a committee woman, but I didn't have any special access to them. But they invited me to come to the county seat in Bucks County and talk to them about this. And I just was talking to them the way I am here about how bad these new machines were that they were going to get, and their history and stuff like that. And they decided to table it. So they actually did not buy them. They kept using the lever machines until they were forced by the Help America Vote Act, excuse me, which was not supposed to replace lever machines. It was just really supposed to deal with the hanging chad. But it was not supposed to necessarily go to electronic machines. But basically, they were forced, they and also New York City were forced into getting new voting systems by HAVA. They were threatened to, this is about, after 2000, it was like after HAVA, which was 2004. So we're talking 88 to 2004, where New York City and Bucks County, Pennsylvania were forced, I forget by whom, I think it might have been it was the Justice Department, to actually replace their lever machines, which again, it was not really written that way in the Help America Vote Act, but it was interpreted in a very strange way. So along the way, because I was doing all of this advocacy, I got known by a woman who also was a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, from the Wharton School. We actually have a president who supposedly graduated from there. We won't necessarily mention his name, but in any event, Wharton School is very well known for, all their business. And this woman by the name of May Churchill, she had been following all of this different stuff about voting machines for even longer than I had. She was much older than me. And she started collecting computer scientists, engineers, anybody knowledgeable on this subject, security wonks, Dr. Peter Neumann at SRI, and Ronnie Duggar. And she got us all together in New York City, and we would go to these testimonies, and we would, make public statements and say, no, we don't want these voting machines. And afterwards, she would critique me, ridicule and humiliation. It's like, why are you talking that way? Stop moving around when you're talking. She was brutal.
Yeah.
And she was really excellent and really taught me how to do that type of public speaking. She had been doing that type of advocacy for decades in California. And I really learned greatly from her. And it was without her help in trying to get us up to speed on a lot of the, hidden secrets and behind the scenes stuff, I could not have been as effective as I was. So it was really due to May Churchill and that early work in Bucks County and Ronnie Duggar in the article in New Yorker. It's still there. You can look for it. Just look up Ronnie Duggar, New Yorker. You'll find it immediately.
We'll take a look for it. Yeah. It's funny definitely. Because we had a poll worker come on. We disguised his face and his voice, so we kept his identity secret. But a lot of people who work in these systems, sometimes they come out of it. It's like shock therapy, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that our elections are messed up so across the board. And, I call you an election historian of sorts because you have said to me that you said pasta. And then we just talked for almost 2 hours the other day, and we just touched the tip of the iceberg because the situation could be so nuanced. But you said across the board pasta, and I've said this myself, we got to change every aspect of our elections, don't we?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's been this way for a long time. The work that I did on my doctoral dissertation, which really was the first doctoral dissertation written on the subject of electronic vote tabulation. And I wrote this before Bush versus Gore. I was documenting all of these things that were going back. We hear these same cities over and over again. You hear about certain counties in Florida. You hear about things in Georgia. You hear about things in Wisconsin. But these are not new. These same places have been doing these same things over and over and over again. And it's all well documented. Now, my dissertation was not intended to be a historical document, but I did have to try to bring people up to speed about what these problems were and why the electronic voting machines were really one of the worst things you could do without any paper. But this had already been written about at NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. And actually, that was brought up in Bush versus Gore. They were waving around the earlier, again, 1980s NIST report where they were talking about the hanging Chad.
Oh, yeah.
And it was supposed to have been abolished. All that hanging Chad was supposed to have been abolished in the 1980s, as well as what you see, that butterfly ballot. The butterfly ballot, as you probably do remember, some of you, if you were around during the Bush versus Gore, was the fact that they staggered. So you basically had your presidential race. You had over here, this was Bush, and then so this finger was Bush and this finger was Gore, but this was like a third party candidate in between. So people saw the punch holes and they thought, okay, Bush, and we want to vote for Gore, so we do the second hole. They're not even looking over on the right. And this had happened before. And the same counties in Florida were told not to use that ballot layout. And ballot layouts can be as confusing as electronic voting. They were voting on paper on these Chad cards.
Yeah.
That had the punch holes. But we're doing the same thing. When they would lay out in those same counties in Florida a ballot face on the screen, they can make it as confusing as they want. And now they're doing it with the paper ballots. So in the paper ballots, and we had this in 2 years ago, where they had the instructions down the left-hand column, and then down at the bottom of the instructions, they had the top of the ballot. The top of the ballot is your presidential, vice presidential race, governor, U.S. senator.
They're setting confusion throughout. Yeah.
Right. That's what we call the top of the ballot. So instead of putting it at the top of the paper ballot, they buried the top races down underneath the instructions. And so, yes, of course, people didn't look there. They filled out the other stuff, sort of forgot, I was supposed to vote for senator or whatever it was. Yeah. And they ignored that. And so what I'm saying is that all of this is still at play. It was all going on for years before
Yeah.
I even started looking at it in the 80s. It is
Yeah.
still going on now. And yes, it's, that's what we have to look at the history. Thank you.
Well, I want to point out that, and you pointed it out too, you wrote your dissertation before the Bush Gore election. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
and we spoke about this yesterday. It seemed like Hava was really set up from what happened in the Bush Gore situation. It was almost like by design. And then after Hava, I guess you see all these contracts with these electronic voting machines even more come into play.
Right. Yeah. What really happened was, okay, so Bush Gore happens, and then there were all these bills that Congress, was trying to go through, but of course none of those ever passed. And then so you had another election, you had 2002, and then there were more problems because Florida and some other places actually did buy the machines. There was no money for it at that point in time. And so that went on. And then 2004 happened, which was even worse, okay, with these new machines. And that's when the Hava bill came out. So all of this, it was like my worst nightmare because, and those of us who had been working back in the 1980s, we saw this evolving and we're like, oh, great. Okay. They'll get rid of the bad stuff, the Chad, they'll get rid of some of the bad stuff. But then we're like, oh no, they're buying even worse stuff. Really, that's what we saw. So we were fighting it. Again, it was a small cadre of people. We didn't have any money for this. Then money was getting dumped in for research. Some groups went off and sort of absconded with the money. And, and then all of this stuff was happening. And then before we knew it, there was all these electronic voting machines. So, crazy.
Well, let's get into it because there's a couple areas that I want to talk about. I want to talk about the areas where a lot of what I call fugazi, meaning fake tactics, take place. Now, one of the main reasons I want to talk to you is I was already set my eyes on the tabulation machines. A lot of people don't realize that there's ballot marking devices, and they don't count the ballots. The tabulation machines count the ballots. And from some of our friends about the closed source versus the open source, open proprietary, all that information, and we can go into that about the corporations owning everything. But I really wanted to call and talk to you about the mail-in stuff. And we'll get to that shortly too as well, and we'll kind of decipher between the two what the difference between a mail-in and absentee are. I'll let you explain that in a second. But I also wrote an article and I bounced it off you, and that's the first topic we're going to talk about. We talk about voter suppression. You kind of mention it as how to siphon off votes, and I call it one of the three areas of fugaziness, meaning the tabulations, the mail-ins, and the siphoning off. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you're talking about when you say this is a way, number one, how we can siphon off votes? Go ahead.
Okay, great. And I agree with the use of the fugazi. As you can see from my last name, I'm familiar with that word, also being in New Jersey. But so no offense intended to anybody. But there are many ways in which we can siphon off the votes. And, some of them include long lines at the polls, early voting stations not being open. This was always happening. And again, Florida has had early voting for a long time because they have a lot of elderly people and they really want to have people take their time doing that. So they have the early voting stations. But then you can misdirect people to, saying that, okay, the early voting station is here, but then it's really not here. And then they could tell people, okay, go to this place for your regular voting location. I actually saw that happen. I work sometimes as a poll worker or sometimes just volunteer to do some poll watching, just see what's actually going on. And people came in one location with flyers and they were like, oh, it told me that I was supposed to come here. So this is fake. It's just a way of misdirecting people away from the polling station that they're supposed to be at. So if we're going to do all absentee voting, or largely absentee voting because of COVID, very easy to say, oh, okay, here's the locations for the ballot drop-offs. And if you don't want to drop it off at the post office, you don't trust it, you want to make sure it gets in, here's the places to go. And then you got fake ballot boxes that people are dropping stuff off at. They don't know what's real, what's fake. They might even have a person there saying, oh, we'll help you drop it in, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. But this has been going on, again, this has been going on a long time. So it's not, these are not new. Richard Nixon would call these dirty tricks. So that was sort of a term that people used for this type of thing that was going on. And we can still see these same things starting to happen already, with people being told that they're supposed to go to a different location, and then it's not open and things like that. And
what about provisional ballots?
Right. Provisional ballots is another thing. I first saw those in New York. So when they had voting machines there, occasionally they would jam up and not work. And so they had an extra stack of ballots that they would say, okay, and they were like green or something. So they would say, okay, use this and vote on this. And then it would go into a separate bag. And somehow later it would get matched up that, yes, you were a valid voter or whatever. But what we really find out is that these provisional ballots, and there's a whole host of reasons why a person could be provisional. They didn't find them in the book, in the list of registered voters, or their signature doesn't match for some reason. Maybe they had a stroke, so there's a whole host of reasons to siphon off votes into the provisionals. Do these provisionals ever get counted? Maybe in some places they do, but in a lot of places they do not. They just use that as a way of appeasing the voter and sort of, rushing them out of the room, giving them the bum's rush. It's like, okay, well, you voted, you're provisional, so we'll deal with you later. So all of that type of stuff. But the whole thing about the long lines in the polls and the voting machines not working is because when you have voting machines, even if they're voting machines that are printing out paper ballots, it's serial. You can only have one person at a time at any voting machine. But when you're just voting on a paper ballot yourself that you're filling out by hand, it's not printing it out. It's just a piece of paper that is the valid blank ballot. And then, you already, they went through the line to get, show your ID or whatever that gets you in as a registered voter. And then they, you get a paper ballot. You could have 20 little booths set up so that 20 people could go in at a time, as long as they get through the registration or the validation process. They could be, around the room in little booths. They just use little cardboard screens, and that would be fine. But no, the whole thing about these electronic voting machines is it's to slow down the balloting process. And then having them print out the paper ballots is even more ridiculous. Printing it out, the papers are going to jam. A lot of them are jamming way more than there should be. But part of that is because the standards for creating the printers and creating these balloting systems are very, very poor. I worked for 5 years with many other engineers in the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers to try to get better voting system standards. And then when it came time for them to create those standards, they created them with a very, very poor mean time between failures. Basically, what it said was that there's a very high probability that during the voting session, these balloting systems are going to fail, the electronic ones. Same is true with the scanners. The scanners actually have a fairly high rate of error, about 5%. People don't really know that. And then not only that, on the scanners, when they're scanning in the paper ballots, they really don't implement the software that's in there, which we're not allowed to see because it's proprietary trade secret. But we know that if a person put a check mark in the box instead of coloring in the dot, that it may not get counted. Or if they put an X, or if they put a circle around the candidate's name. Now, in many states, that is considered legal. And so the laws are not being implemented in the software because the people writing the software don't really care. All they want to get is the millions upon millions and millions, really billions of dollars to have these communities purchasing these machines.
Yeah.
So they are not required to satisfy the state regulations. Yeah. And all of those ballots should actually be manually counted so that way we know that they get their votes in correctly. Yeah. None of this is being done. None.
It's funny because like a lot of people say, what are the solutions for this? And we need to come up with several solutions. Like we said, we talk about this. I refer to this as the front of the house. We have to make it not only do we have to fix the back of the house stuff when you're talking about this proprietary software, which, we have to fix everything. The front of the house, we have to make it efficient. We have to get young people confident so they can get in and out to vote. Jonny even says, our engineer, that we should have a giant stadium, rented out for areas where people can go vote and where a ton of people are working, and it's just efficient and quick. There's plenty of parking. Nothing is in the way, no hurdles to give young people and, working class people the confidence they can get in and out to vote when they have to work 2 jobs or their child's being babysat and they're paying that on the clock where they got to go home and feed their dog. And, of course, with these mail-in contracts that are crazy, whatnot. But the first thing we should do, Dr. Mercuri, I think, is throw these corporations out that'll have this proprietary software. The first things first, get rid of the corporations, have the people owned. I mean, I'm not talking about specific solutions, but number one, the people need to own all the software of what we're voting with, because it's our elections, our votes, and it needs to be a transparent for everybody. And
Absolutely.
That's my suggestion. Throw out the corporations first, and let's start talking about solutions.
Absolutely. And I unfortunately had to work side by side with these vendors of these, creators of these electronic voting machines on the standards committee. And anything time we tried to have better improvements, more accuracy, more security, they just voted against it.
Yeah.
And it was thrown out. So, this is the way it's been done in this country for a very, very long time. It's a few corporations. There's some history about it that you can read, where you see that there's these same families that have been doing this for over 100 years. And, they've been doing this for a very, very long time. And You don't have to have things be proprietary trade secret. They could make them just open source. There's no law that says this stuff is trade secret. But when they sell these contracts say that you're not allowed to open this up.
I know.
You're not allowed to check it. We've been protesting. Again, I've been doing this for a very long time. And so back in '88, that's when we found out, it's illegal to examine the inside of a voting machine. And we were trying to get laws passed. I know that Rush Holt was trying to get one done when he was a congressman, and he was trying to get one where it would be legal to, if there was a dispute, to actually examine the software. But that law never got passed through the Congress. So it's anytime we've tried this, one state, New York State, did actually get it written into their rules for the contracts for purchasing the voting machines. And they do have the right to actually examine the software. But do we know that the software that's in there is the same software that they gave them to archive as the correct software? No, we do not. It's so easy to change this. We've had so many, you can watch on YouTube videos, tons of YouTube videos about how easy it is. One of the most ridiculous things is that the computer science department at Princeton University had a bunch of people who were like hacking into voting machines, and they were buying these voting machines because you can get them on eBay. Believe it or not, I had some. I bought some voting machines. Still have a few in my garage and in the cellar. So you could buy these voting machines. These are the real voting machines. These were ones that were being decommissioned. So they were buying voting machines, and they were hacking into the voting machines. And some of the voting machines were the exact same voting machines that they use in the county that Princeton University is in. And believe it or not, the county, for the elections, they actually drop off the voting machines in the same building, the computer science building at Princeton University, and they're sitting there unattended. Nobody's looking at them. They demonstrated this in a courthouse in New Jersey, showing that within minutes they could just take the chips, substitute them, do all sorts of things. We talk about the ROM chips and things like that. You just pop them out. The key that was used to lock these machines is the same key, or some of the machines is the same key that's used in hotels for like the trust box in your hotel room. It was bizarre. These guys had all these keys on their keychains and were just opening up the voting machines. I don't know that they ever did it to the real ones, but why would they put them in that building where they knew the hackers were? It's mind-boggling.
There's no security when it comes to our elections. The chain of custody is always broken time and time again. And we found in New Hampshire, they had SIM cards in their machines as well. Oh, now I don't even have to get into the machine. I can, if I'm a hacker, I can access it from the parking lot. I don't even have to come in there, so don't even worry about it.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Let's talk about mail-in voting.
Had actual cell phones in there that would phone home the results after the election. How secure is that? That was ridiculous.
A lot of nefarious things. Let's talk about mail-in voting, because right now, mail-in voting, everybody's talking about it right now. It's a hot topic. Mail-in voting, you say, is the same as absentee voting. Now, there's no difference between that other than the semantics you said. But why is it important to understand that mail-in voting is the same as absentee voting?
Okay, because a certain individual keeps trying to say that absentee voting is okay, like in Florida and in Texas, but mail-in voting is not okay. And that is ridiculous. The ballot is exactly the same and the envelopes and everything about it is exactly the same for absentee voting as it is for mail-in voting. The whole process is exactly the same. The only difference is that absentee voting in a few states, not a lot of states, but in some states, you have to have an actual reason on this checklist in order to obtain a ballot. So if you're ill or all sorts of things, if you're going to be out of the state for work or whatever, and you have to apply for it in some of those states, you have to keep applying for it. New Jersey and many states abolished that. I am and have been, as soon as they got those electronic voting machines here in my county, I have been registered as an absentee voter. At first, it was not a permanent thing. I had to every single time re-register as an absentee voter. Then at some point they passed a law in New Jersey where you could just check a box and say, I'm a permanent absentee voter. And again, no excuse is needed. And so I am a permanent absentee voter. Now, when my ballot shows up, I have the choice, and I've always had the choice in New Jersey to mail it in, which I don't like doing because I don't know that it's going to get there. Or I can drop it off. And there is in the county seat, actually, that building has an elections office where you can go in on election day and even days before election day. Because again, if you're not going to be around, you may need to do it earlier. You go in, and it's actually very secure there because nowadays they actually do check my driver's license. Who's checking driver's licenses when you drop it off at the post office? Nobody. So I actually feel it's much more secure. I have to go in there. I have to sign a sheet. Again, nobody signs a sheet at the post office, but to sign a sheet that it's me, I'm dropping off my ballot, and then it's in the secure envelopes, and I at least know it got there. And then they used to, I think they may still do it when they take it, through a window, and they take it, and then they've got a date stamper, and they run it through there. You hear the ka-chunk, and then they throw it into the bin. And so I really feel like, okay, I know that I prepared my ballot the best I could because I saw it. It's not electronic. And I know I prepared it properly. I know it got there because I did it myself. I saw it with my very own eyes. Whether it gets counted, that part I don't know. But again, that's still the same in the rest of the process. But I still feel it's better because those first two steps, I know I prepared it the way I wanted, and I know that it got there. That's not true with any of these electronic voting machines, even the ones that print out ballots, because some of them print out the ballot and just whisk it away. You don't even get a chance to take a look at it. They might show a vision of it on the screen, but it's not the same as the ballot.
Yeah.
So
they have DRE machines too, which
DRE machines too, and
those are terrible. There's no paper ballot, no nothing.
Right, and I think it's really important for people to try to find and also talk to your election officials in your counties and your states to tell them we want more secure locations, and you want those. When you get your mail-in ballot, there should be a list of where the official places are. This is my ballot, and it's got my name on the outer envelope. So this is official. It's got official looking things on it. And then there's a list in there of where I can drop them off. And I think that's the most important thing, because we've even had, the township websites and the county websites be down on election day. So if somebody's looking for the place to drop them off, want to make sure they get them in time, they're not going to be able to know. So, and all the monkey business I was talking about, the fugays, about misdirecting the people. We want it very clear when you receive that ballot packet, and the instructions should be very clear. Now, people should be making YouTubes. I think maybe we should make a YouTube. We should be making YouTubes about when you get your ballot, these are the things you need to do, because people don't think they need to sign here and there. Okay, I already signed it once. Why do I need to sign it 6 times? I mean, it's confusing. That's another way that is siphoning off votes. So you want to make sure that it's really very clear. Now, my county did create a video because we were having the primary was going to be all absentee ballots, and they did create a video. The video was very unclear, and there also was very unclear instructions as to where you could drop off your ballots. We can do better. We can do a lot better.
Yeah.
But we were talking about security, so we can talk about how we can do security better.
Well, let's just to make sure we clear the waters too, because it's kind of funny because we talk about absentee and mail-in voting as the same thing. However, certain states you have to fill out for a mail-in or an absentee way beforehand. And if you don't do that, you can't change the laws where the Democrats, I think they want to kind of expand it so everybody can do mail-in or absentee, which would, and people start asking like, well, what's going on? How are they trying to cheat? How are the Republicans trying to cheat? And I always say, and maybe you could back this up, I said, well, it kind of lies within the state. In other words, Donald Trump is saying, oh, we're not going to have all mail-in thing, whatnot. He's not going to expand that and get rid of the signature, but he's okay because there's a friendly contract in Florida, so he's okay with those absentee ballots. Because I'm not gonna let Trump off the hook over here. I am very skeptical of the mail-in ballots and the whole system, and we'll get into that and how fugazi and fake it could be. But let's be honest. It looks like both parties are kind of jockey for where they have the better contract, whether it be in the tabulation machine or in the mail-in area. Is this correct?
Right. And really, the whole thing, whether you mail it in, is absentee voting. It always is. You're absent. You are not in a polling booth. So it's just a manifestation of whether it's mailed in or whether it's dropped off. But it's still absentee. Any of it is absentee. It's just that in some states, it's a very more strict rule as to who is allowed to get those ballots. And really, it should be open to all. If I don't, New Jersey was very, out in the front on changing the law to make it so that anybody could get the paper ballot and then vote that way. And then a lot of people were encouraging it because we knew that the electronic voting machines could not be checked. They're proprietary. They're confusing. They created long lines at the polls. So we were really encouraging. We've been encouraging it for a long time with the help of New Jersey election officials. So it's, and California, of course, Oregon has been doing this. They were, I think, one of the first to have the all state, have the entire state.
Washington, I believe now.
And then I don't think originally they did have the drop-off locations. I may be wrong about this. I think it was you had to mail it physically in, but I think then they soon added the drop-off locations.
Yeah.
And that has turned out to be great. You just, have to make sure that you're really dropping it off at a drop-off location.
Well, we can't put the cart before the horse. It should be open to everybody, but we have to talk about two things first, right? I mean, not only do we have to fix our tabulation machines and get open source software if we're going to do that, but we have to talk about the lack of security with these paper ballots, number one, and the ballot tracking, the fact that we don't have those things right there. Because when you talk about the lack of security with the paper ballots, you kind of compare it to checks, lottery tickets, and prescription pads, and they all have a far more tactics of security features inside their ballots, whether it be micro pinning, use of color, watermarking, holograms, and it's all very inexpensive. Inexpensive.
You can buy hundreds of checks for like what, $7.99.
Yeah, but none of it's being done on paper ballots. None
of checks you can buy that have holograms, micro printing. You hold it up to the light. It's got a watermark on it. We have this technology. It's dirt cheap. I don't think there is a single balloting system, not only in this country, but in the world, that has any paper ballots that are as secure or have the security features of a check,
Yeah.
which you can buy for literally pennies, literally pennies, pennies, pennies. So there's no reason why we can't do that.
Why is it important, Dr. Mercury? Why is that important?
Because the whole idea is that, okay, so let's say you want to flood a township or a county, whatever election jurisdiction with additional ballots. We don't know if that is going on. There has been some rumors that maybe this is happening. So the counties, when they're getting the ballots in and then they're aggregating them and then taking them out of their envelopes and stuff, they're finding that we need to reject these. We are not so sure exactly what's causing them to reject them, but it's very easy if you have the information that needs to go on the ballot and you have access to those ballots to just run off more of them. And then you could literally just create more ballot envelopes, more ballot papers. And then if you have access to the names of the voters, their towns and where they are, their physical locations, you could create these little stickers that go on the outside that are saying, that information. And it could look to a person like it's a real ballot. Maybe they're mailing them that instead of the real ballot, or maybe they're just flooding with these other extra filled in ballots. And now the township is receiving these and it's like, well, wait, we received 3 for this person. Which one is the real one? And how are you going to figure out their signatures and stuff like that? So I still think that they're doing a good job at trying to monitor that in some places, in many places. I believe that in many places, the election officials are really trying to do a good job. But in some places that are historically the same places where they're always having problems with their elections, I believe that in those places, they may be prone to having all these other extra ballots and they're separating them out of their envelopes and then just throwing them in the bin and they're getting counted.
All right.
And that's a mess. So
wait a second.
We need to, and I want to, when I take my ballot out of the envelope that they mail it to me in, I actually want to be able to see, okay, this is a real one. And there's something on the website that says if it's a real one, it has these following things. It might even say it on the ballot itself. It has these following things. So I'll know. It makes it much harder to duplicate, makes it much harder to fraudulate it. So I think that that's a really important step that we need to take, is to really secure these ballots. Nobody's ever done this. I really truly don't think no one has ever done this in the world. But it's crazy because we do it for things like lottery tickets. They know when a lottery goes off, they know that, there were 3 that had the winning number. They know this stuff. And then the other thing that you were talking about, which I think, is so important. We know when we order something from Amazon, we know.
We're talking about ballot tracking now.
Ballot tracking, right? Exactly. Okay. We know when we get order something from Amazon or eBay or Misfits Market, if we order something, we know from
exactly where it is.
We know, okay, order was entered. They send you an email. Then they say, your order has been packed. Then your order has been shipped. You should expect it in 3 days. Then they say it's on your front porch. So why can't they do that with our ballots?
An envelope, I know, right?
I want it, right. I want it. It's so, look, maybe we need to get, Bezos or some of these people to be doing this, helping us out with this, but this is ridiculous. Why can't I know that my ballot was mailed? Why can't I go to a database and see my ballot was mailed and see that my ballot was dropped off in my mailbox? Why can't I do that? I mean, I think
a lot less fugaziness would go on if they did that, because they know people would be tracking their ballot. Yeah.
Way less. Right. Yeah. And then if I don't get the ballot, then I know that, more fugaziness happens. So then I know, it's like you said, my ballot got dropped off on Tuesday. It wasn't in my mailbox on Tuesday. So I think these are such simple, obvious, trivial to implement. I mean, I'd say trivial, sure, it's going to take software, but we have that software. So
we're not even tapping into it.
We're not even tapping into it. Yeah. We could do this. There's absolutely no reason why we can't. And again, those of us who are working for election integrity, as I have for 30 years, whenever we try to propose this, oh, they just get laughed out of the room. Oh, we couldn't afford that. Oh, we can't do that. It's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous.
So let me ask you a question, Dr. Mercury. You're saying with a lack of paper ballots and a lack of ballot tracking, a registrar of LA who's from Washington can have a contract for the mail-ins with a company in Washington and that he's friendly with from back in the days. And since we have a lack of security of paper ballots, he could print up a bunch of ballots, dead people, no people, whatever, of Joe Biden, and those will be counted. And we don't have a lot of measures in place to catch this because we don't have ballot security. We don't have tracking security. And a guy like Joe Biden can get 28% of the votes, most of them mail-ins. Is that possible? That a fugazi?
I don't see it as impossible right now. And again, as I said, these voting system companies, they have been on the ground for a very, very long time. If you're watching on TV and the news and they keep showing, here's a box about, they always like to show it, like, here's somebody with the ballots. And you notice that they all, no matter what state they're in, Wisconsin, Oregon, it all looks the same. It's got this same swirl on it. It's because it's printed by the same company. They don't even change it to make it look like this is the Oregon one. They all look the same. They use the same envelopes and stuff. So we know, if you know those envelopes, then you could have 100 more of them printed up in some sort of back room. And it is public information, your voter registration. So because people use that if you need to get signatures on a petition to run for office and stuff. So this is all known, all this information about who's registered, what party they're registered at. We have all that information. So they've got these companies that are doing this. Is anybody regulating these companies? Is the Federal Election Commission looking into it?
No.
No. Did the HAVA bill have anything to do with this? No. They didn't. No, it was, it's like, oh, whatever. And so, then people like to talk about, nursing homes. In nursing homes, there's all this stuff going. I don't really think it's going on in nursing homes. And actually now many states have laws that if you're declared mentally incompetent, then you lose your voter registration. So they can't even do that anymore. So they, maybe back in the day there were, people voting people's ballots in nursing homes for them. But I find that extraordinarily hard to believe. And it's too much easier to just do it any other way. It's not being checked. Dead people are voting. Dead people have been voting for an extremely long time.
Yeah, the Kennedy-Nixon election, people look into that. They say that Papa Kennedy fixed a lot of votes in Illinois. There were a lot of dead people voting, and same thing in Texas for Lyndon Baines Johnson. He put it in the bag there. That's why I think Tricky Dick said the whole dirty tactics or whatever he was talking to back in the days. And, there was a scene in the movie Irishman where they were writing down names in the graveyard and then going in and voting. But when you do some research, you saw they did it by way of mail-in or absentee. They got a lot of dead people on the ballots that were gone, and they voted for from the grave. They voted for John F. Kennedy.
From the grave, they're voting. It's just terrible. And then, again, this goes way, way, way back because, if you're, again, a historian, about Boss Tweed, and then there were these cartoons, this guy Nash, and you can find these cartoons, they're all over the internet, of like this big burly guy, Boss Tweed, with a ballot box, and then you would see him kicking it. These cartoons, Nash would make these great cartoons about the counting, that it was the counting. And, so in there, he's standing there with his arm on the ballot box and stuff like that. So there's the fugaziness that happens, like in creating extra ballots, but also in that back room, like you were talking about the front of the house and the back of the house. In the back room, when those ballots are being opened, when the ballot boxes are being opened, who's watching that? It's supposed to be bipartisan. But if you're in a place like Philadelphia where there really aren't any Republicans, maybe a handful of them, it's not going to be counted by partisans. You got people who are really Democrats who are registered as Republicans so that they can be part of the counting. So it's just, it's just not, this has been going on since time immemorial. It's not that it is just going on in this election. It's going on in this election because it's been allowed to go on. And all of these things, there, and that was a disheartening thing. I always thought, and that was what kept me going, was that, okay, if we get rid of these electronic voting machines and the hanging chads, we might have a fair chance because we can have these paper ballots and we can secure them and do all this. But no, they were like, oh yeah, great, give us the paper ballots. We'll use all our old tactics that we used to use in the 1880s. So this is not new. What has to be new is we have ways of securing all of this, and we have to apply this. And it's not going to be internet voting because that's vastly insecure, but we can do this right. We really, really can. But people have to want to listen, and they have to actually want to implement it.
Yeah.
And so far, it's in short supply.
Well, it's a shame because a lot of times that people on the solutions table can't meet eye to eye, and they can't see eye to eye, so they knock heads and stuff too. Because I'll probably disagree. You're a computer forensics, a computer scientist of sorts, and yet I've told you this, that no matter what we do, the counting of the ballots have to be done in the vote centers or the precincts where they are cast.
Oh, yeah, I've been long for that. I've been long for that. So, they have to be done. We don't want to move them out.
Exactly. Once we break the chain of custody.
Right. I believe they should get people in there, draft them the same way they do for jury duty, and they validate them. And then, you have to show up at 8 p.m. and you're going to stay until 2 a.m. until you're done. And it's all going to be video recorded. I mean, we learned all this from George Floyd. If you do not have a video of this from multiple different angles, you're not going to see the hokiness and the horribleness that's taking place. And so we need to have people there, from the public who are holding their cameras up and are, broadcasting this, on whatever, forms they have to be able to broadcast it, recording it. And it should be done. It should be done manually. If they want to scan them through, and if you want to have the results on television by 11 p.m. from the scanners, then those are the preliminary results. You can do that.
Yeah.
I don't really see a problem with that, because as long as those machines aren't destroying the ballots as they're sending them through.
Well, I'm a little indifferent. I believe that humans are the ones to blame. I don't believe it's computers. I believe humans mess in the computer. So me personally, I want it done in the precinct, and I've said this before. Right. I want it going right into a computer scanning machine, open source, and then I want a hand count after to verify. Right. But I want that first computer number because I don't trust humans, and I don't trust humans to mess around with it. So, but I want it all to take place there, and we could talk about solutions. I mean, I'm open to anything. I'm not closed to anything. But let's talk about the ballot scanners, because you said the ballot scanners have a high degree of unreliability. Also, many legal ways of marking ballots, according to each state, have never been implemented in the scanning software. So many votes are just discarded, which should be legitimately counted, right?
Correct.
Cases about this wind up before the judge or usually get dismissed. Give us a little more insights about this.
There was one in New York, in which I was asked to submit a written testimony explaining all of that. And they even had the ballots. I think there was 2 candidates separated by a very small number of votes. And the ballots showed very clearly that this, the person who was not declared the winner should have been declared the winner. And the judge was like, nope, sorry. And
I know, right?
Disregarded all the expert opinions. So that is really a problem. That's, again, a problem of this. But I warned you about one topic that we could go on for hours about this. But you're going to be hearing about this partial audit, or they call it a risk limiting audit. And
1% in Los Angeles.
Oh, my goodness. It's insane.
Dungeons and Dragons.
It's Dungeons and Dragons. They're using literally Dungeons and Dragons 10-sided dice that they roll on the table, and it generates a random number, and then they use that into the computer, of course, because the computer will not alter that number, and they use that to pick out these 1% of ballots that they're going to count. Now, the way these risk limiting audits work is that depending on the differential between the leading candidate and the next candidate, that determines how many ballots are supposed to be counted, so that whatever it is, whatever they count would be enough to make sure that the other person wasn't swapped. Except who generates the number? It's generated by computer. So you have the computer generating the differential. And then you have this magic formula, which really only a person with a master's degree where they had to take a lot of statistics classes, like maybe if they were a psychologist, would really even be able to. I taught the graduate statistics, so I can read the formula. But I can tell you almost zero election officials know how to understand the formula. So the formula is inside the computer, again, in the secret software. And the formula is actually saying, this is how many votes you have to count in these precincts and blah, blah, blah. And in Colorado, I sent you the picture. There was a guy who plotted a chart showing that in a district with about 150,000 voters, they only needed to count between 12 and 16 ballots in order to say, okay, the result is perfect. How is that statistically possible? But that is this crazy math that they're doing with the Dungeons and Dragons dice. Is a bunch of professors, one from, I believe, UC Berkeley, one from Princeton, who doesn't like me very much, one from MIT. These guys have been proposing this, and they've been proposing it for 20 years. I'm not kidding you. And I have been protesting it for all this long. And now state after state are suddenly moving over. Oh, well, we won't have to count all these ballots. That would be horrible. We'll just use the risk limiting audit. And so, I try to speak sanity to everyone I speak to and show them it's like, okay, all right, you're running the election. You have to certify the election. Do you understand this formula? Here it is. And they don't understand it. I mean, I actually asked in the public forum, I actually asked the head of the New Jersey, he's the top official overseeing all the New Jersey elections. And I said, do you understand the formula yourself? He said, no, but I have other people who do that for me. So how's he certifying the election? The rule is that each state has to certify its elections. California is very detailed. Sometimes it can take weeks or even months. And so each of those small elections, big elections, they all have to be certified. Sometimes some states, it's the Secretary of State. It's a different person in different states. But ultimately, there was this person at the top that certifies it. But this person at the top doesn't know beans about any of this. And so what is their certification worth? I mean, it's like, some, bozo checking my car to make sure the brakes work. I want a certified person who knows how to fix cars, making sure that my brakes are working correctly.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And one other thing, getting back to things like the lottery and casinos and stuff. The casino, even the people who work in the casinos, making sure that these machines are working correctly and aren't skimming off money and are doing the proper algorithms. They check those much more rigorously. We've had them in, for discussions, and they have said, if we did the casinos the way you guys do the voting machines, money would be flying
gone
out the windows.
It'd be siphoned off.
Right.
Siphoned off.
Siphoned
Dr.
off.
Mercuri. Let's do a really quick recap. So, really quick recap before we get out of here. So, we have 3 areas of voting. We talked about they siphon off a lot of votes. My article, which I shared with you, and we talked about that in depth, is the front of the house. We have to make, because you say it's all aspects. It's not just a one thing fixed. It's fixing the whole situation. When it comes to our voting, making that efficient, making sure that the software is good, that people get in and out, that there's no fugaziness, no DREs. There has to be a paper ballot of sorts. There is argument or discussion whether it could be a ballot marking device or hand. But I mean, that's open for discussion. But
some people, if they're visually impaired, they may really need the ballot marking device. But we've even had those ballot marking devices that people use. It didn't vote for the person that they voted.
So if we get one that works, the ones that in California and Los Angeles you're supposed to look at. Anyway, what I'm saying is that we have to do away with DREs. We can't have direct recording electronics. No way. There has to be a paper
DREs
ballot.
are bad.
Right? We need a paper ballot. Yes. So that's our front of the house.
Fighting for that.
Yeah.
I've been fighting for that for 30 years.
Yeah. So we fix it to where a student can come, he's in between class, he gets in there, bam, 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 he can vote. A mother who's got kids that she's got to get to, bam, bam, she can vote. No 3-hour lines, not 4-hour lines. This is America, and we can get you whatever you want so quickly at your doorstep the next day, but we can't have a clean election. It's ridiculous. So that's one area. Now, mail-in. We can have...
Or absentee.
Or absentee. We can have mail-in and absentee for all, but we also have to have a serious sense of security when it comes to our ballots itself. We have to have security, the fact that we can't have too many fake and fugazi, and we have to deter people from making those fake and fugazis. Also, tracking of your ballot. Very, very important. As an individual, if I can look and say, oh, my mail-in ballot is now it's at the LA post office. It's expected to be delivered in a day. Now I know, and I got it right here, and I know when my ballot's there. So
there it
tracking.
Is. There it is.
Tabulation machines in the back of the house, or if we use them, we don't use them. Either way, the votes should be counted in the vote centers or precincts, whatever you want to call them. The magic centers, they got to be counted there so we don't mess up the chain of custody. You're for 100%, not audit, 100% hand count, because audit means partial.
Right.
We're going 100%.
At the precinct with people with their cameras videoing it so we know what's actually going on.
But if you're like me and you want the ballots going first into a computer, you have to have open source software if we do that.
Yes.
So you could, I think you got to do both. Because I don't want anybody looking at the ballot. I don't want to see it. I want it into the computer.
Open source that could get audited, but you need both. You really need to have the both. And plus, the software may miss things because the scanners, even the ones that are open source, they do have some unreliabilities.
Yeah.
So
have we covered back it up? Yeah.
I mean, what is amazing here is that you are a genius, because I've been saying this to thousands and thousands and thousands of people for 30 years, and none of them seem to understand it the way you do, which tells me that they do understand it, and they're deliberately, not because you're a genius, you are a genius, but these people are very smart, and they know exactly what they are doing, and that is what is really going on. So when we're not getting all of these things that we could have to secure our elections, that is deliberate.
Let's leave it right there. That's a great way to end the show. Dr. Rebecca Mercuri here. Johnny, you had anything else? Dr. Rebecca Mercuri, one of the best in the business when it comes to computer forensics, electronic voting. She knows it all. She's been around. She's been elevated. Even before the 2000 election, she was out there talking about these Fugazi machines out there. Go check out her Twitter. Go check out her website. You want to learn more? There's a ton of literature. You could just Google it and look it on up. Dr. Mercuri, anything else you want to tell us before we get out of here?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. And I hope, we'll stay in touch. This is such important information. Just blast it to everybody you know.
Hey, listen, we said this too. We said this the other day. You want a Green New Deal? You want Medicare for all? You want to end the world wars? We got to stop, right? What's that? You want to defund the police? You want to do anything you want to do. You
want to not get COVID.
It starts here, right?
And there's my sticker. You got to vote. Don't let everything that we said disappoint you such that you do not vote. You must vote. It is very, very important to vote. And fill out the census too. So it's because that determines, the electorate. So it's really, really important that we do this, because that's how we're letting them know we're not going to go away. We want this to be done right.
Very important. You keep voting, we'll keep fighting. For Pasta Jardula from the Convo Couch with Jonny Tsu on the ones and two, Dr. Rebecca Mercuri in the house. We'll see you later. Go vote, election integrity, and Convo out.